Hey man, it's me, Kevin Smith, Silent Bob, and all those terrible Jay and Silent Bob type pictures, man. You're listening to Drop the Mic, the only podcast that I listen to that I'm not a part of. Every podcast I listen to, I usually talk on it, but not fucking Drop the Mic. That's where I'm like, let me hear what the boys have to say. And now, we drop the mic.
You're a very good observer, Cole.
We have a very advanced program, something very different.
An opportunity to reduce your sentence considerably.
And possibly play an important role in returning the human race to the surface of the Earth.
No license, no prints, no warrants. Well, he took on 5 cops like he was dusted to the eyeballs.
What year is this?
What year do you think it is?
1996.
That's the future, James. Do you think you're living in the future?
I am simply trying to gather information to help the people in the present trace the path of the virus.
We're not in the present now.
This is a place for crazy people.
I'm not saying you're not mentally ill. For all I know, you're crazy as a loon.
The army of the 12 monkeys, they're the ones that spread the virus.
Monkeys.
He's been living in a meticulously constructed fantasy world, and that world is starting to disintegrate.
You haven't become addicted to that dying world?
No, sir.
He needs help.
I think I'm crazy when people start dying next month. I don't belong here.
You're here because of the system.
I know some things that you don't know.
Yes, my son.
You sent me to the wrong year.
You're certain of that?
Science ain't an exact science.
You had a bullet from World War I in your leg, James. How did it get there?
I don't know.
You're a trained psychiatrist. You know the difference between what's real and what's not.
You said that I had delusions. You said you could explain.
I'm trying to.
I want the future to be unknown.
I can help you. Get you out.
Can't hide from them. Don't even try.
We're all monkeys.
The thing mutates. We live underground.
They're watching you.
I just want to do my part to get us back on top, in charge of the planet.
Welcome back to our humble San Diego podcast. We are your hosts, Wesley Swanson and Chris Pawlak, and together we are Drop the Mic. This is our end of June special, which just so happens to be kicking off our second annual Summer of Sci-Fi program, and the film topic in question this time around is 12 Monkeys. But before we dive further into this 1995 classic, let's get warmed up, shall we? Here is episode 323, Past Imperfect.
And now for a special news report, brought to you by Drop the Mic.
What's up, dude? Welcome back.
Thank you for having me, as always. I appreciate it, and as you and I were just talking about, what's up is I've been extremely busy with work the last few weeks, so it's amazing that we're even getting a chance to sit down and do this tonight.
Yeah, man, as I say at the end of each month, thank you for making time for us, and this is always a blast.
Yeah, absolutely, and this is a fucking amazing movie that doesn't get the love I think it deserves.
Absolutely, man. I think, and I'm sure we're going to get into it at some point in the show, but Terry Gilliam, I just think, is very, very undervalued for the true auteur that I think that he is.
Well, I also think that his last handful of movies have not been great.
Yeah, I can agree there.
So hopefully he can get back on track, but we'll see. But I think, yeah, his earlier work is so much stronger than anything he's made in the 2000s and beyond.
So, with you saying that, what is your stance on the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus? Were you not a fan?
Not really. I would have to go and watch it again. I remember it not being as gripping as I hoped it would.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be curious to see the movie that was there before Heath Ledger died.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it kind of makes sense within the context of the movie that, he changes faces. And, that explains, why the actors change.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I'm very curious to see what it would have been. I'd have to go back and give that a second watch. I do not want to rewatch The Brothers Grimm. I tried sitting through that again pretty recently, and just it was such a slog.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Never been a fan of that movie. It's kind of like that.
Being very lukewarm on it the first time, and then I revisited it like maybe last fall, and just was like, man, this movie is dragging ass big time.
It reminds me of that god awful Van Helsing movie.
Oh, debatable which of those two movies is worse. But yes, that Van Helsing movie is like 20 to 30 minutes too long, and it's just CGI noise. It's like a much less competent Michael Bay movie.
Oh man.
From the guy who made The Mummy, which is really a lot of fun. Unfortunately, he also made The Mummy Returns, which is not.
Very hit or miss with that guy.
Yeah. Stephen Sommers.
All right, man. So, do you want to get us started with some news?
Yes. Let's jump into some news stories. As always, we seem to not be able to avoid this. We have to shout out some deaths. I know that you said you shouted out Cormac McCarthy a couple weeks back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we lost him, and it's always so weird because we were just talking about him. What was that? Our end of March or maybe end of April episode with the Grifters, because they were talking about adapting Blood Meridian. He was going to be the one that was going to adapt it. So I know that we had a somewhat lengthy discussion on Cormac McCarthy and his works. So now that he's passed, I wonder who's going to take over the script writing duties on Blood Meridian if he hadn't completed a draft of the script.
Do you think maybe they will just kind of shelve it?
I would hope, since that's always been a movie that is rumored to kind of be unfilmable, or a novel that is kind of rumored to be unfilmable. I've heard strong cases made for, like, you know, a 10-part, 8-part HBO miniseries, something like that, to better adapt it. So I would be curious. I mean, they've been trying to make it since the novel was released in the mid-'80s, and it hasn't happened. So, you know, will someone finally be able to crack it? I don't know. I'm wondering if they'll continue even without him, since he was the one that was supposed to be writing the script for it. But R.I.P. to him. Read some of those novels. They're fantastic. And I cannot recommend Blood Meridian enough if you have the stomach for it. And obviously, No Country for Old Men is great. The Road is great. Check those out. Did you give it? Yeah, R.I.P. for sure. Did you give a shout out to Treat Williams?
No, I did not. But we can do that right now.
Yeah, R.I.P. to Treat Williams, who passed as well. It was a motorcycle accident, wasn't it?
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah, bummer. Good actor. I was trying to remember the last thing I saw him in, and he was in, which I believe I recommended last year, he was in the great HBO miniseries We Own This City from David Simon, and starring John Bernthal, our guy.
Yes.
That's another miniseries that I would recommend you check out. Hopefully it's on Max and hasn't been shit canned like everything else they seem to be doing over there, which is another news story that I have for you.
Are you a fan of, or no, damn. I was going to say, he only did the substitute sequels, right?
Yeah, because Tom Berenger was in the original. I remember watching the substitute. It's like kind of a trashy B-movie, but it's pretty fun. And watching like Tom Berenger like beat the shit out of high schoolers is pretty fun. Or people who are posing as high schoolers, at least.
I'm going to say, and I haven't seen it in a few years, but as far as aquatic horror, I guess Deep Rising is pretty fun, or I remember
Speaking of Stephen Sommers, yeah, Deep Rising is great. Wes Studi's in that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Deep Rising's is a hell of a lot of fun. Good call on that one. He's also in an okay but not great Harrison Ford Brad Pitt movie called The Devil's Own.
Mm-hmm.
He's the villain in that, but definitely worth checking out. Brad Pitt's just kind of miscast. And I did read that apparently there was like trouble making that movie because everyone kind of had their own different idea as to what it should be. So that's kind of why it's not as great. And you have too many conflicting visions for what something should be. Yeah, R.I.P. to Treat Williams.
R.I.P.
I'm gonna shout this name out. I don't know if you know who he is. You definitely know some of the roles he's played. I want to shout out Frederick Forrest, who died last week. Mainstay in a lot of the Francis Ford Coppola films. He's got a great bit part in the conversation. He's amazing in Apocalypse Now. He plays Chef. He's got that great bit where they get off the boat so they can go get mangoes and then get scared by the tiger coming out of the jungle, which I couldn't verify it. I tried looking it up, but I had read somewhere that was unscripted, that the tiger really did come out of the jungle and he really is freaked out.
What?
For all of your listeners who don't know the backstory of that film, you should definitely read about it because it's wild. But I had read somewhere that his scene where they get off the boat so he can get the mangoes and then get scared by the tiger coming out of the jungle at him was unplanned. That just happened, and that freak out that he has over the tiger, whereas he's running back to the boat and he's screaming and ranting and raving as he's on the boat. I read that was all unscripted because he really was freaked out that some random wild animal came out of the jungle while they were filming a scene.
I mean, rightly so, right?
Yeah, I mean that's a man eater.
Veering off real quick, didn't I give you, what was it, framed Apocalypse Now Laserdisc?
The Laserdisc, yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, the Apocalypse Now is one of my favorite flicks. And I was so stoked to see it in IMAX a few years ago. That was pre-pandemic. But they had like a special engagement of it in IMAX for a couple of days. I got to see it, and it was incredible. So shout him out. He's also the dad in Valley Girl. He's in a really weird, kind of offbeat Western with Marlon Brando and Jack Nicholson called The Missouri Breaks.
Mm-hmm.
But he just recently passed away, and then this morning, I opened up the news and see that Alan Arkin passed away.
That was in my news as well.
Yeah. So R.I.P. to him. I mean, he's been around a long time. I believe he is an Oscar winner for A Little Miss Sunshine.
Yeah. Got that pretty late in the game, too.
Yep. He was great in Argo. I believe he was nominated for that. He's the one that has the Argo fuck yourself line. But let's step through some of his flicks here because he's in a ton of them. He's in a great, like super great comedy called The In-Laws with him and Peter Falk.
Mm-hmm.
Great old movie with the older film. I shouldn't say old with Audrey Hepburn called Wait Until Dark, where she's a blind woman and she's harassed by three burglars in her home. He's great in that. He's the father in Edward Scissorhands.
Mm-hmm.
Has a very great kind of deadpan performance in that. Oh, The Rocketeer. God, The Rocketeer. He's great. Glengarry Glen Ross, another favorite film. Incredible film and play by current shitbag David Mamet. Well, I guess the last thing he was doing was that TV show on Netflix, The Kaminsky Method, with Michael Douglas,
mm-hmm.
which I have not seen, unfortunately, but now feel kind of compelled to check out. So shout him out. He's got a ton of great stuff. Check out his IMDb. But good actor. I think it was 89, 90?
89, yes.
89, okay. Somewhere around there. But just looking through some of this stuff now, man. Like Glenn Ross, he's incredible in. I love Edward Scissorhands. Little Miss Sunshine, he's great in it. So shout him out.
R.I.P.
Watch The In-Laws too. Really fucking funny movie. We like to talk shit about Max around here and what's going on with Warner Brothers. Now Warner Brothers Discovery. Because they keep doing all the wrong things over there. Mainly because of the guy in charge, David Zaslav, who we've given a strong fuck you to before. But, was it last week? I believe. He was cutting senior staff from Turner Classic Movies.
Oh, no. What?
Yeah. And it kind of seemed like, well, Turner Classic Movies is now going to be on the chopping block. And I'm, in the last 4 to 5 years, become a big champion of that channel because it's got a ton of great programming on it. It's got a ton of great hosts that have a super rich knowledge of film and film history. And, introduced me to a lot of older films that I had never seen before that I love now. And we'll definitely play some more modern stuff. I don't think they have it anymore, but they used to have a great, I think it ended earlier this year, they used to have a great Friday night block called TCM Underground, where they'd play just great cult films, which they still do, but not in a regular block. They'll just kind of randomly play. But it seemed like Zaslav was going to cut the channel, and some big names stepped in and had a talk with him, and those names were Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese and Paul Thomas Anderson, who are big champions of the channel and obviously of film history. And they had a call with Zaslav and wanted to ensure that the channel remained protected and untouched. And according to them, they had a very good call with Zaslav, and he assured them that he has a love for old movies, that he wasn't going to trash the channel. But, I don't know if you can really trust this guy. He seems to be doing everything he can to cut costs and lower the value of Warner Brothers and their archives. But apparently those three directors now are kind of unpaid consultants for the channel. So according to Zaslav, Turner Classic Movies isn't going anywhere, but these three guys are now going to kind of be curators for the channel. So if that's what it takes for it to stick around, I'd be very, very happy to hear that.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that, right?
No, it's just that's awesome, and hopefully that channel doesn't go away. I know that's kind of a cable thing, and maybe a lot of people who are strictly streaming might not have access to a lot of that. Supposedly Max has a classic movie hub that has a lot of the programming on it, but not nearly as much as is on the actual channel. But there needs to be more channels or more availability on streaming for older films. And I don't mean films from 20 or 30 years ago. I mean films from 70 and 80 years ago and through the 50s, and those older films, or even films that are more modern that you might not really know about because they were very small, very independent movies, or did not do well. And that channel has been very good at highlighting a lot of underseen and underappreciated films. So, like I said, I've been a big fan of it, and it's really helped me kind of go back and catch up on things that I wouldn't normally have seen. So I don't want anything to happen to it. I am very happy to hear that, these guys cared enough to step in and say something, and sounds like going forward they'll be part of this channel in some way.
Christina Ricci is finally getting her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame for 2024, which is about time.
Awesome. Yeah, I can't believe she doesn't have it yet.
Yeah.
For someone who's been in the business for so long.
Definitely an icon just for Wednesday Addams alone. But yeah, she's done a bunch of great work, and she has a prominent role in the new Yellow Jackets. Say what you will about season 2, but...
Did you finish it?
I have not yet, sir.
Okay, when you finish it, we will have a discussion.
And then wrapping up news, so we don't linger too much as far as time-wise, Evan Peters has been cast as the main villain in the new Tron film. He will star alongside Jared Leto. Any thoughts on this?
So is that actually happening? Because I know that they talked about that for a while, and that Jared Leto was talking about it, but he seemed to be like the only one who was talking about it. So is that really going to happen then?
It was.
Cast a villain?
I do know what you're talking about as far as that movie seemed like it was lingering in development hell for quite like at least 2 years.
Yeah.
Maybe now. But yeah, I feel like I've read enough about it that it seems like they finally are starting to chug along as far as getting it done. But I don't think Tron Legacy did what they wanted at the box office, which probably has Disney kind of scared because it is a more of like a subculture property,
Yeah. Well, I have my own mixed feelings on Tron Legacy, except the soundtrack is incredible.
Yeah.
And Jeff Bridges is pretty good in it.
The original one is pretty fucking wild too. It's such a weird movie.
Yeah. By the way, Tron Legacy was the one 3D movie I saw that gave me the worst fucking headache of my life. But before the shingles. For some reason, trying to watch that in 3D, maybe it was because a lot of it was dark. I don't know, but I had a terrible, terrible headache after seeing that in 3D.
Can I ask why you chose to see it in 3D? Were they not having standard screenings?
I don't know. I just thought maybe it would be cool to see in 3D.
Mm-hmm.
As established before, it's hard for me to watch 3D because I wear real glasses. But, I've obviously seen a few movies in 3D, you know how big of a fan of Hugo I am. I thought that it would be cool in 3D because of just the nature of the environment of the film.
It is
for whatever reason, just like the darkness maybe just killed me.
Yeah, it's really fucking dark, especially because I remember going to see it in 3D too. And I had kind of a bad experience. I think I went to Horton Plaza. I took my sister and she took her boyfriend, right? And they completely left me sitting alone and went and sat in the front, all like super weird. But yeah, we did watch it in 3D. And I just remember being kind of like disoriented because of the way that it was filmed, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But watching it at home in the regular format is totally fine. It's actually looks really, really cool, like just in the standard.
Yeah, I agree. On the rewatch, I was like, oh, this is a much better film without the 3D.
And now it's time for the weekly recommendations.
I do want to recommend The Elephant Man, David Lynch's film. I just rewatched that a few weeks ago, and it's a great movie. The black and white cinematography is incredible in it. John Hurt is amazing in it, and Anthony Hopkins. John Hurt plays the Elephant Man, John Merrick, which was based on a true story, and it's just a beautiful film, and the black and white cinematography is gorgeous, and Hurt's performance is hopeful and funny and heartbreaking all at the same time. So I want to recommend that. David Lynch is someone who's always had like kind of a wild career.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing that he made this trippy experimental midnight movie in Eraserhead, and then the movie that he makes after that is The Elephant Man, and then almost makes Return of the Jedi, and instead makes the his version of Dune. It's wild, and then he goes off on this other tangent. So check out The Elephant Man.
So first up, I wanted to talk about. So I got screener tickets for the new Talk to Me film from A24. Have you heard about it?
Oh yeah, that has a creepy trailer.
Yes. So before I do my little write-up, I just wanted to shout out Cinebeth from KBPS and Film Geeks SD and 7 Octobers for putting me on the guest list. That was very kind,
awesome.
Very kind of them, and it was a lot of fun. So, Talk to Me is an Australian-based horror film which made its debut at Sundance and was bought up by A24. Directors Danny and Michael Filippo make their feature-length debut in great fashion with a supernatural thriller that feels tethered to the Babadook with its emotional punch. The film spins the story of a group of teenagers who begin to conjure spirits in the form of a game with an eerie, embalmed hand. This is a lot of fun and actually legitimately scary.
Well, yeah, it's on my list of things to watch, hopefully. And like I said, it had a really great trailer.
Yeah, when you sit down and watch the film, I think, and it feels very like A24 to its core. So good, man. And everybody's so good in it. The effects in it, everything, very kind of possession, body horror stuff going on. Check it out. It comes out July 28th, so I got to see it a great deal in advance. And
can I ask where?
It was at the Mission Valley.
Cool.
And these guys, for them, they're YouTubers, I think, they made their kind of name for themselves doing YouTube shorts. And so this was their first film, and to come out of the gate with this, man, once you see it, you'll know what I'm talking about, but very, very impressive stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
All right. What else? I wanted to give a shout out, of course, to Hulu's The Bear Season 2, which just dropped, I think.
Oh, yes.
So
haven't started it yet, haven't watched it yet, but was a huge fan of the first season, and I'm excited to watch the second.
Yeah, you're gonna love it, man. I think it's on the par with the first, if not better. So brace yourself.
Good.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And now for the movie focus of the week.
Kicking off our Summer of Sci-Fi. This week we're talking about 12 Monkeys. It's rated R. It's from 1995. It's sci-fi noir. It runs 2 hours and 9 minutes, and it's got a well-deserved 88 on Rotten. Written by Janet and David Peoples, directed by Terry Gilliam, starring Bruce Willis as James, Madeline Stowe as Catherine, Brad Pitt as Jeffrey, and the late Christopher Plummer as Dr. Goines. The film is set in a dystopian future where the Earth's surface has been ravaged by a mysterious human virus, which has forced the remaining 1% of the human population to live underground while animals once again rule the Earth. James Cole, a known convict, is set up with a mission to travel back through time to help with figuring out the origins of said virus. Our director for this film is Terry Gilliam, who first made a name for himself with the British Monty Python Comedy Collective in the late 60s up until the early 80s, trying his hand at animation, writing, acting, and of course, directing. Gilliam would begin venturing out to direct various projects starting in the early 80s, finding very little commercial success until 91's The Fisher King. Gilliam had just passed on a project when he was approached by Universal to direct 12 Monkeys, although he was unsure at first about directing a film he hadn't written himself. He soon agreed, having been fascinated by David and Janet Peoples' script. Universal and Gilliam had a disagreement a few years earlier for his film Brazil, which caused some tension but ultimately led to Gilliam landing the gig with Final Cut privileges under the agreement to make the picture on a $29.5 million budget, as well as finishing on time. This would cause the main cast to take a hefty pay cut to be involved. 12 Monkeys is considered a remake of a short French film which was released in 1962, with 12's English composer Paul Buckmaster managing to capture what feels like French themes in the vein of Amélie throughout. Ironically, Buckmaster claims his inspiration came from that of Argentinian tango. The shooting schedule lasted over a period of 4 months towards the beginning of 1995, taking place largely in Baltimore, Philadelphia, and New Jersey. Despite bad weather, prop issues, and personal accidents, the crew managed to stick closely to the shooting schedule. The film had a limited run in the U.S. on December 29, 1995, before opening wide on January 6, 1996, earning $57 million domestically and pulling in over $111 million in other territories, making the film a huge financial success, which better yet also struck a nerve with critics who largely praised the film. Overall, 12 Monkeys continues to age well with its absolutely dynamite cast, all whom give very great performances, including Brad Pitt, who was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, Oscar, and won a Golden Globe for what might be still his most outlandish character portrayal outside of Tyler Durden. It's safe to say director Terry Gilliam was right in his refusal to change any aspect of the film after test screening audiences said they hated it. Although the film does play with some big ideas, it does a great job at feeling very contained and mysterious up until its final frames. And I would even go as far as to say that the project has had a huge influence on the sci-fi subgenre since its release, with contemporary films like Looper playing with a lot of the same themes. Most importantly, this is one of those films that seem to bring forth new aspects and theories upon each revisit. So if you haven't seen the film, or it's been a few years, we strongly advise seeking it out. 4 lazy eyes out of 5. Thank you.
The eye thing is nuts because you really don't see it when he's in the hospital in the beginning.
No, yeah, he looks, his eyes look normal.
Yeah, he's wearing contacts, obviously, because Brad Pitt has lighter eyes. But you really see the crazy lazy eye later on when Cole gets transported back to
96, right?
96, yeah. And he goes to visit him at the party that his dad is having. And he's in, the tuxedo. Then you can really tell the lazy eyes there.
Yeah.
But speaking of, Pitt is great in the movie. He's so good at playing just this crazy character. It's easy to see why they singled out his performance.
It was, and he was just kind of becoming a big thing, right? He had, was it Legends of the Fall, 7?
Yeah, what happened was when they hired him, none of those movies had come out yet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he had been in A River Runs Through It in California. A River Runs Through It might have been a decent-sized hit. I don't remember about California, but that was kind of more of a little scene because it was kind of a nasty thriller.
California is fucking awesome.
I'll have to rewatch it. It's been forever since I've seen it. I mean, he had his breakout role in Thelma and Louise, obviously. And obviously, I want to shout out Floyd in True Romance, the best character of that movie. But when they were casting this movie, Legends of the Fall and Interview with the Vampire had not come out yet. And 7 was the movie he was making just before this. We discussed this years ago when we talked about 7. The injury that he sustains in 7 is for real. And because he had such a short window to shoot 7 before he had to go do 12 Monkeys, that's why that injury is written into the film. It's because they couldn't delay production on 7 because he had to go right into the production of 12 Monkeys. But all of those movies came out, late 94 and 95, a few months before 12 Monkeys is when 7 comes out. So by the time this movie comes out, he's a huge star. An
A-lister, if you will.
Yeah, he's an A-lister, but when they hired him, they got him on the cheap because he really hadn't been in a whole lot. I'll have to look. I know Interview with the Vampire came out around Halloween or Thanksgiving of 94. I don't remember when Legends of the Fall came out. I don't remember if that was an early 94 movie or an early 95 movie. It opened at Christmas. So Interview with the Vampire and Legends of the Fall opened up within about 2 months of each other. So yeah, then all of a sudden he's an A-list star when 12 Monkeys comes out. So it's kind of weird seeing him in this kind of a bit supporting role. I mean, he's pretty integral to the film, but he really isn't in all that much of it.
Yeah, he kind of pops in and out. He's in the mental institution.
Yeah, he's got the big scene in the mental institution in the beginning,
mm-hmm.
and then he's got the scene at the party, and then really only there's a bit scene with him inside their headquarters when Madeline Stowe's character Dr. Rayleigh is trying to get their attention,
mm-hmm.
and then
in the van,
right. Yeah, just that little bit in the van after they kidnap his dad. But I think in total his screen time is probably maybe 15 minutes tops. And I'm probably even overshooting that. You know what's coming.
Yeah.
It's from 1995. We're going to talk about every single 1995 movie ever on this podcast. I'm sure of it. Because as your listeners and my supposed fans, as you like to say, no, I'm a huge, huge fan of 1995 in film, and you and I have covered so many 95 films so far. We just covered one at the beginning of this year with To Die For.
Mm-hmm.
But we've covered 7. We covered Dead Presidents. We've covered Strange Days. We've covered Get Shorty. You and James back in the day did Casino. I'm sure at some point you and I will talk about Apollo 13.
Heat is 95, right?
Heat is 95. Friday, GoldenEye, Desperados, 95 movie.
Which we
Devil in a Blue Dress, which we'll probably end up talking about.
Denzel, yeah.
So there's a lot going on in 95. I think it's an incredible year for film. And this was a great 1995 film to end on, to end out the year.
Did you see this in the theater?
Unfortunately, no. I didn't catch it until video, when it was out on video, and we rented it, and I was watching it with my parents when it came out. But when it came out, I was at that weird age where I was in high school, but I wasn't driving, so everything is like dependent on them.
Oh, okay.
So there was a lot of movies that I didn't see right off the bat before I started driving, unless I was with them or being able to go to the movies like after school got out, because it was right down the street. So I wish I had seen it in the theaters.
Do you want to tell me about your? So you watched this for the first time with your parents on? I'm assuming VHS.
Yeah, VHS. Whenever it was out on video, that a few months later, 6 months later. This is one of my favorite sci-fi films. It's a little offbeat. That's Terry Gilliam's style. It has that very kind of steampunk aesthetic in the future. But I think it's an amazing sci-fi film. It's very underrated. It's got a lot of great time travel theories. It's got what do they call it? I want to say paradox, but I'm not sure it's the paradox thing, where it's kind of like the whole plot only exists because of Bruce Willis's character.
Mm-hmm.
The whole reason for everything happening is because of him. He's the one that is sent back to study and obtain, the thing of the virus, but it's his idea that gets everything going that leads to the virus being released. And just like that time loops back on itself. Yeah, and when they're in the hospital, they're watching the footage of the animal testing, and he says, maybe the human race would be better off, or should be wiped out. And then Jeffrey stops and gives him that look and says, "Oh yeah, we need to focus on the present and the immediate right now, and that's escaping the hospital." But he gets the idea, and then when he visits him again in 1996. Jeffrey says, "Hey, it was your idea. You're the one that gave me the idea." And it's the rantings of of Cole and, Jeffrey being untrustworthy and Rayleigh's rising suspicions of what's going on or what's about to happen that lead to her talking to Dr. Goines, Christopher Plummer's character, and him wanting to better their security practices and giving the idea to David Morse's character about the virus. He's the one that ultimately releases the virus because he was what does Rayleigh call him? Like a doomsday, like one of those doomsday guys.
Mm-hmm.
And he has that discussion with her after her not introduction, but when she's introduced back in 1996, because we meet her for the first time in 1990 when she's overseeing James Cole when he shows up in 1990. But when she's introduced in 1996, she's giving that lecture and talking about, people showing up at different points in time and ranting about this or that and talking about a plague, speaking a weird language. And he's there at that lecture that she's giving, David Morse's character, talking about, humans are the real scourge on the planet. So he's the one that ultimately releases the virus, but it's James Cole talking to Jeffrey Goines, and Jeffrey Goines being crazy and bringing it up again later, and Rayleigh talking to Dr. Goines to get him to, pay attention and to be careful with what he's doing, and saying that your son is the cause of things. That leads to David Morse's character, Dr. Peters, being the one to have access to the virus that will be released, that will kill the majority of the world's population. So it's a really, really great structure. You follow the time loop, and it's so fascinating to watch and then see all these things that from Cole's time in the future all of a sudden pop up in the film as they're happening for real in the quote unquote present day of 1996. You mentioned the French film that's based on?
Mm-hmm. La Jetée?
La Jetée, yeah. Which I believe is what is it the airport? The platform? It says the jetty, but the observation platform is really what it is. Not a jetty like, down at the beach or something.
The rocks or whatever.
Yeah, not like that. But just like a platform. 12 Monkeys is inspired by that film, even though apparently Gilliam had never seen it.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's the story of a prisoner in post-World War III Paris. Used in time travel experiments as scientists try to undo the circumstances of the present by reaching out to both the past and the future. I believe it was a nuclear war. Yeah, post-World War III Paris. So, yeah, nuclear war is what ended up destroying the world. And it's told pretty much in still photos. Yeah, it's only like 28 minutes. But a lot of what happens, or a lot of what is suggested by those photos in La Jetée, are translated into 12 Monkeys, like the survivors living underground, prisoners used for the time traveling, him landing in multiple time periods before actually landing in the period he's supposed to land in, even though like the Vertigo homages.
Yes.
The relationship that he forms with the woman, in this case, Madeline Stowe's character, Dr. Rayleigh, and the memory that he has of his youth of seeing someone gunned down on the platform in 12 Monkeys is he remembers seeing someone gunned down in the airport, and he has this like reoccurring dream or this reoccurring memory of that happening. So a lot of those elements that are in 12 Monkeys are in the original film that's based on the La Jetée movie, even though it's told in still photos.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but was it David Peoples' work help write the Blade Runner?
Yes, which kicked off our Summer of Sci-Fi last year. Yes, David Peoples was a co-writer on Blade Runner. He co-wrote with Hampton Fancher after Fancher was the original screenwriter and then had to leave the project, so David Peoples came in. And he also scripted Unforgiven. But if I'm not mistaken, those are really the only few movies that he's done. Maybe Soldier. Remember that Kurt Russell movie? I think that's a David Peoples script.
I remember that one, yeah.
Not great. You want to hear what some of the other movies he wrote?
Sure.
Lady Hawk, which I think is an underrated Richard Donner movie from the mid-'80s. Leviathan.
No way.
With Jeb Stewart. Leviathan's like a super guilty pleasure movie of mine that my friend Chris Asakawa and I would always reference. Something called Fatal Sky. I don't know. That doesn't sound familiar to me. Unforgiven, Hero, which I remember. That's with Dustin Hoffman.
Mm-hmm.
12 Monkeys, and then Soldier. And Soldier is his last credited screenplay. So you mentioned Gilliam was coming off of The Fisher King, a movie which you and I both really like, and you said you picked up on Criterion.
Yes.
He was trying to mount a Tale of Two Cities adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
And that just, he couldn't get it working, couldn't get it off the ground. And then the producer of this brought 12 Monkeys to him and thought that, this would, your sensibilities kind of suit this material. And because Gilliam had such a shitty time with Universal on Brazil, he said, I'm only going to do it if I can retain Final Cut.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted like a bigger name in the role. He wanted
Jeff Bridges, right? Or Nick Nolte?
I think he wanted Nick Nolte for the James Cole.
Uh-huh.
And he wanted Jeff Bridges for Jeffrey Goins, which that would have been cool.
With those actors, do you think that it would have came off the same?
I think Jeff Bridges could have pulled it off.
Uh-huh.
I don't think Nick Nolte. I think this is like a top 3 Bruce Willis performance.
Oh, yeah.
If not the top. I would say this, probably Unbreakable. Die Hard, even though he's a bit more quippy and action hero mode in that, which he absolutely 100% works for. I'm not knocking it. But I think in terms of kind of showing more acting range.
What about, where does Sixth Sense rank for you?
Sixth Sense is up there, but I don't think that performance in The Sixth Sense is nearly as good as it is in Unbreakable.
Okay.
I believe he's got a lot more internalization in Unbreakable.
Mm-hmm.
He's dealing with a lot. And The Sixth Sense, that strength works on the screenplay and the misdirect. I think Unbreakable works a lot better on Willis's performance. But I 100% think that this is like a top 3, if not his best acting performance. I want to throw out Moonrise Kingdom too, because I think he's fantastic in Moonrise Kingdom. But Willis brings to 12 Monkeys, he brings that kind of that crazy, but also that wounded, confused. I don't want to say childlike, but when he gets excited by the things in the past that he hasn't been able to experience in his present in the future. Getting super excited at like the music,
mm-hmm.
the radio, the news stories, the commercials, listening to all that, him seeing all that. He kind of brings this sense of wonder and amazement along with that is he crazy? Is he not? He really sells the dramatic stuff at the end. So I think he was a much better pick for the role of James Cole than Nick Nolte would have been. Nick Nolte's much better being a bit more grizzled. So I think Jeff Bridges would have been a good pick for Jeffrey, but I don't think Nick Nolte would have been a good pick for Cole.
Yeah, and I think with 12 Monkeys being a kind of on a modest budget, that it was a good way to go with Willis, because he had that kind of fan base, that star power.
Well, I think he's coming off of Die Hard with a Vengeance, which is earlier this same year.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got, this mega hit Die Hard franchise that he's very popular for. And yeah, the studio kind of mandated they wanted a bigger star. Gilliam goes with Willis because Willis, he was impressed with him because Willis had auditioned for the Fisher King in the Jeff Bridges role. And Gilliam was impressed by that, really liked his work in Die Hard. So goes with Willis, and I think he made, a dynamite choice. But yeah, the studio wanted a bigger name. Not that Nick Nolte wasn't a big name, but Willis has more box office draw. And even I think Willis really wanted to work with Gilliam and agreed to, a much lower salary in order to get the movie made on the budget that Universal wanted to make it for. But did you see some of the other names they were kicking around for that role? Nicolas Cage, maybe could have worked. And he was coming off of Leaving Las Vegas, so I think he might have been... I think Leaving Las Vegas was the same year. They might have been out around the same time. Maybe that works. Sylvester Stallone, no way.
That would have been super distracting.
No way. And even De Niro. De Niro, maybe. And Gilliam obviously had a relationship with De Niro because of Brazil. But I don't see any of them working as good as Bruce Willis does. And you can wonder and guess all you want. And maybe we're just biased because we know how good the movie is and how good it works with Willis. But I'm not a fan of any of those picks. The future is never specified, but I was reading like 2035 is about the time frame that's estimated to be. So humans have been living underground after this virus that wipes out most of the world's population. And they're using Bruce Willis, who is a convict in the future. They're using him and other people, because his buddy Jose is one of them too, that they're trying to send into the past to get a sample of the original virus before it mutated, so that they can work on a cure, so that they're able to go back topside again. And it's a different thing from other time travel movies where they're trying to stop something from happening. That's not the point of this. The point is they're trying to obtain the virus before everything so that they can create a cure for it, so that they are able to roam the earth again and not hide out underground. So I think I'm going to skip ahead here because we usually save this for a little bit later, but I think a guy by the name of James Berardinelli, who has a film blog called Real Views, thought that Gilliam and Peebles had an intelligent and creative motive for the time travel, and that was the fact that rather than being sent to the past to try and change it, the whole purpose of Cole's mission is to observe it, obtain the virus, in order to make their future, their present, better. So that's what the point of the mission was. It wasn't to change the past. It wasn't to stop the virus from happening, because, as he says, and Rayleigh later reiterates, is you can't change the past, and you can't stop what's already happening, but you can change the future. And we change the future by, obtaining the virus and bringing a sample back. Maybe the ending is a little ambiguous. With he gets on the plane, you know that he's traveling to all these major cities around the world, because we see him in the check-in at the airport earlier, and we know from Cole's briefing with the scientists in the future, that it's released in these major cities. It's Philadelphia is where it starts, and then it goes San Francisco and New Orleans and Rome and where else? Karachi, Kinshasa in Zaire. Budapest? Was Budapest one of them? Peking. That the virus travels, and Dr. Peters has tickets for all of those places. And he says it's business. But when he gets on the plane at the end, the woman sitting next to him on the plane is one of the scientists from the future.
Mm-hmm.
And she says that she's in insurance. So either that means she's there to just obtain the virus and complete that mission so that she can bring it back to the future and they can create not the antidote, but a cure to allow the humans to step back out onto the surface again. Or is she there to stop him from releasing the virus all over the world? I think it's a bit ambiguous, but I think in, rewatching the film and everything that's happening, I think the loop is going to continue to happen, but they're saving the future by obtaining the original virus. So Cole will still grow up in that world with the virus, will still be a convict, will still end up going back through time in order to try to obtain the virus. That's my reading on it. I think that Jones on the plane next to Dr. Peters is just there to get the virus, knowing full well that we can't change the past because what's happened has already happened.
Because Cole was there, his initial mission was just to figure out who it was who actually had the virus, and for a long time he thinks it's the Army of the 12 Monkeys, and
yes,
and then it ends up that it's not anymore.
Yeah, 12 Monkeys weren't the ones that released the virus. They were only interested in releasing animals from captivity.
Yes.
And you hear the phone call that he makes at the airport. And then at the airport, his friend Jose shows up, like right after he makes the phone call. And he says, "How did you know?" And he's like, "Oh, from the phone call." And he's like, "What, the phone call I just made?" And he's like, "Hey, just made it," or, whether it was 30 years ago. For him, it's 40 years in the past when Jose hears that. I think Cole is going to try, his intention is to try to kill Dr. Peters to stop this from happening. But obviously he's gunned down before that happens. And he sees the event happen as a young boy.
Mm-hmm.
And everything just loops back onto itself. But yeah, you hear the phone call that he makes saying, "It's not the 12 Monkeys, it's someone else. We were wrong. This is what happens, but I'm not coming back." He wants to stay in whatever present he can make with Dr. Rayleigh. However doomed that present might be, either by, the release of the virus or his inevitable death. I think the first time I watched it, I was under the impression that they were trying to prevent everything from happening.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I watched it over the years, it was kind of like, oh, what's happened has already happened. We cannot change the past, but we can try to make a better future. So no matter what they do, they're not there to stop anything from happening. They're just there to observe. And for him to get the virus, they end up tracking the virus a bit more. He's there to kind of figure out who did it, but as everything plays out, he kind of figures out, oh, it wasn't this, it was this. He sees the spray paint on the window that Dr. Rayleigh sprays on the headquarters of the 12 Monkeys.
Mm-hmm.
About this is where it starts, 5 billion people die. You see that slide that he sees in the future. And then when he goes back to 1996, that moment where Rayleigh is trying to get their attention inside the building, she ends up spray painting that on the wall. And then when they're trying to figure out, like, is Cole crazy? He's trying to tell her, I'm mentally divergent. I'm crazy. I have created this reality where I'm in the future to deal with my present, where I'm a crazy person. But then he sees the spray paint on the window and he knows I'm not crazy because I've seen this before. I remember seeing this in the future. Someone showed this to me in the future. There's that. We kind of know that he's not crazy because we see him in the future. even though maybe we could just be seeing what he thinks his present is. But in the context of the film, is he a crazy person? Because Rayleigh is trying to figure that out. He's ranting about the virus, and he thinks it's 1996 when it's really 1990. And she asks if, hey, that 1996 is the future. And he's like, no, that's the past, because from his perspective, it is the past. Because he comes from the future of 2035. And then there's this whole thing where, is he crazy? Is he the one that did this? Is he really from the future? And even Cole doesn't know. He's trying to convince himself that he really is insane. But as we get into, the third act, and he sees the spray paint on the wall, he hears the voicemail that they play for him in the future that Dr. Rayleigh is the one that ends up leaving, about where the Army of the 12 Monkeys, where their headquarters is. You realize that he's not. And he sees the buildings in downtown Philadelphia that he sees in the future when he's out there collecting specimens. He recognizes all that. They're in the department store that he's in the future. So he starts to realize, no, I'm not. I'm telling the truth. Even though he has a hard time figuring out what's real and what's not, as per his conversation with the scientists in the future, because he says that he doesn't think that the human mind is meant to be split up in two different dimensions or time periods. It's messing with his head, where he's not really sure what's real, what's not. I mean, even when he comes back from 1996 the first time, and he wakes up in the hospital, and all the doctors are like singing to him, and there's that weird painting above him.
Mm-hmm.
It's, where am I? What is this? He thinks he has that mental illness, which, by the way, that scene is very Terry Gilliam, with them singing to him, like tucking him in. He's got like the kid's blanket. The guards come in and they're dressed ridiculously. But it's funny, like Rayleigh's arc goes from her trying to figure out what his deal is in 1990 to being frightened of him, obviously, because he kidnaps her, and then kind of wanting to help him, as her job as the doctor, but then kind of slowly believing him and slowly coming around to, this guy may or may not be telling the truth, but there's something about him that draws her in.
There's also, he tells her that story of that kid that was trapped in what is it, in like a mine or something?
Yeah, it's like a mine shaft or a well out in, I believe it's California.
And he tells her like it's pretty much that it's a hoax. And then it comes out on the news later on that it really, that the kid was just pulling some kind of prank and was hiding in a barn the whole time.
Yeah. It's a memory that he has from his childhood, which, as we know, he was a child in this era. So he remembers that. Even though the world has gone upside down since then, he's like, oh, I distinctly, I remember this memory. It's the same thing when they're in the movie theater watching Vertigo. Oh, I think I remember this movie. I think I saw it on TV when I was young. When they get to the airport, she's excited to kind of go on this journey and convince him that, he just needs help. He's not really from the future, but, she, as things go along, kind of realizes he's probably telling the truth. As unbelievable as this story is, he's probably telling the truth. She has that story in the lecture about Jose. She has the picture of Jose when they end up in World War I in was it 1917 somewhere, where Jose is wounded, and then Cole wakes up there, and Cole is in shot. And she has the story at the lecture of, first it's someone in like the 14th century who shows up talking about a plague. And you're meant to wonder if that's one of their time travelers in this experiment showing up, and they hadn't dialed in the year, so that's why they're skipping around in time. They haven't landed on an exact time frame.
Yeah, don't they? I don't know if it's 100% like said in the film, but it seems like their time traveling technology is kind of not like fully functional, where they're kind of guessing a time frame.
Yeah, they're kind of guessing, and the guy that he speaks to with the raspy voice, who may or may not be real, says that they're not exactly geniuses, which I think is untrue because they know enough. But also, it's time travel we're talking about. It's probably not exact. What did you say? He's like, exact science isn't exact with these people.
Yeah.
So that's why he gets sent to a few different time periods before they dial in on 96. During her lecture, she mentions, someone from the 14th century who showed up in some village speaking a language that no one had ever heard, or a strange language.
I was a big fan of Brad Pitt in this role. I felt like he did a really good job despite not having, as you said, a lot of screen time, but a very kind of pivotal character for the story. I think that Bruce Willis is phenomenal, and I think I wholeheartedly agree that this is definitely amongst his best work, for sure. As we were just talking about kind of the slightly ambiguous ending, there's a few different ways that it can be interpreted, but I do agree with your theory that like they're only trying to gather information as opposed to try to change the past.
That's how I read it, based on everything else that we know from the film, that we're told in the film, is that they can't change anything because it's already happened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's one of those paradoxes of time travel, is you can't go back and change anything because it's already happened. And that's how I feel like they are in this movie. They know that they can't stop the virus from happening and from destroying the world and killing all these people, but they know that they can make a better future for themselves the more that they know, and if they're able to obtain that the virus in its pure form before it mutates. Now, I don't know, after 40 years, almost 40 years, how many times the virus has mutated or to what form, but if everyone is dead and or underground, and you're assuming that the people underground are not infected, how potent would a cure be for that virus that maybe not, possibly doesn't even exist anymore because there's no one around to be a host? Assuming that there aren't infected people living up on the surface. I don't know any of that. It was just, that was a thought that I had, where if everyone went underground, you would assume that the people underground didn't have the virus or were immune. I mean, Cole is a young kid. When everyone starts dying, he says he remembers that. So is he immune, or were they able to just avoid it long enough to go underground?
My question for you is, if they're all immune, I don't think that they would have added those kind of scenes where once he comes back in from being up on the surface, them like kind of scrubbing him down and disinfecting him. I feel like they take a lot of precautions the way that, to protect like the remaining survivors in a way.
Go
ahead.
No, that's, you're absolutely right. They're doing what you see people do. Even working in labs, they're in those suits, but as soon as they step out of the lab where they're working with the virus, they go in that little chamber where they get not sprayed down, but they get the gas or whatever it is that disinfects everything. Excuse me. So yes, they're taking precautions, but that was just something that I was wondering. How potent is the virus still after 40 years if everyone went underground? Is it still out there? You know, how does it transmit at that point if there's no human hosts around?
Yeah, because I mean, at that point, you could be like, it could be paranoia, where maybe they could go up there and be fine, but they don't want to take the risk, especially if the human race is as endangered as the movie kind of lets on it that it is.
Yes, because it kills like 99% of the world's population.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We haven't really talked about how. What are your thoughts on the music? I think it's really good and brings kind of like even more of an originality to what we're seeing, because it's kind of the exact opposite of the kind of somber tone of this entire film.
Yeah,
you know,
it's like kind of jaunty. It brings that kind of French flair, like you said in the write up in the early on. It doesn't stick with that. It's not like, you know, you have this like kind of downer ending, and it's not like it doesn't like go right into the credits with this accordion music playing.
Yeah,
like everything is all happy. It's got its serious tones in it, but even it's jaunty in some parts where it's a little bit more of a romp before you realize how serious everything is.
Mm-hmm.
I looked that guy up. He only has done one other film score, and that was a movie I barely fucking remember called Most Wanted with Keenan Ivory Wayans. That I have zero memory of. When I looked it up, I was like, oh, I vaguely remember this.
Why do you think that is? I know during my research, I saw that he did some kind of scores for like kids programming as well.
Yeah, he mainly does orchestral collaborations with like more established British artists, because he's an English composer.
Mm-hmm.
But he worked with Bowie, he worked with Elton John, he's worked with the Rolling Stones. But I was surprised to see that the only two film scores he ever did were 12 Monkeys and Most Wanted.
I know a few years ago, they re-released they restored the film, and Arrow Video put out like a restoration Blu-ray for it.
I might have to try to pick up that Arrow Video Blu-ray. I'm not happy with my Blu-ray. The user interface isn't great.
Okay. Like it's an older transfer?
The transfer is okay, but it's just the user interface. Like anytime I stop it, or it was like hitting one of the menu buttons, it literally would bring me to the very like root menu. I paused it the other night because I went to go like clean up and brush my teeth so I could put my retainers in.
Uh-huh.
And when I came back, it was like it had restarted the disc completely.
Wow, that's odd.
I had to sit through everything. It was making me nuts. So I'm gonna have to look up the Arrow Video and see if I can get that version.
It's pretty rad. It's got some alternative artwork with like a monkey kind of stencil, but it's super cool. I think you'll like it.
Oh, it's cool. Oh, it's like only $20. Yeah, that's a good price. Let's order that right now. On air. By the way, speaking of the soundtrack, there's a great Tom Waits needle drop when they're in the city. When they go back to back to Philadelphia? Or no, it's after he kidnaps her and they leave Baltimore and he goes to Philadelphia. The spray paint on the wall, the symbol, the 12 monkey symbol on the wall, and then he stops the car. Or makes her stop the car so he can get out. And then that's where he runs into the homeless person with the raspy voice who he thinks is the guy from the future that he's been talking to, who may or may not be. I think that's kind of left ambiguous too. Like that guy might just be a figment of or the guy speaking to him in the future might just be a figment of his imagination.
But if that's true, how come Catherine hears the same thing?
She hears the voice, but when she talks to that guy about Cole,
he has no idea.
He has like no idea.
Mm-hmm.
So is that guy really the guy that he's talking to in the future? Or is that just another like figment of his imagination? Will your listeners drop you a line in the DMs and let you know if that guy is for real? Because I was thinking, oh, here's the guy. He's one of the other time travelers, like Cole's friend Jose.
Mm-hmm.
But then, yeah, when Rayleigh is speaking to him, she says, "Hey, I need to find James." He has no idea what she's talking about. So either that guy is for real and his mind is mush from the time travel, or that just happens to be some guy and that was the voice in Bruce Willis's head in the future.
Or he just calls him Bob. There's not a terrible amount of violence in this, except for when they go to, well, apart from the ending, of course, but when they go into that theater and they get attacked by those two guys.
There's those guys that attack him in the theater, and then when they go to the Flophouse Hotel to hide from the cops, when they meet up again in 1996 at, about the right time, there's the pimp that comes in and tries to shake them down, and Cole ends up beating him, and Rayleigh tells him to stop, and he takes the guy into the bathroom, and he thinks that this guy has been sent to, to track him, to follow him, and he takes out his teeth, which is a super brutal, which has to hurt like a motherfucker if he's cutting them out with a switchblade.
There's that funny line at the end when he tells the cops, what does he say about Catherine? Where he's like, yeah, I just got attacked by some broad and a fucking dentist or something like that.
Yeah. Like a fucked up dentist. Yeah, there isn't a whole lot of violence. You're right about that. But the violence that is there is pretty brutal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even the two guys that jumped them in the abandoned theater, like that scene where Cole beats that guy to death is really fucking brutal. And I think he was a violent criminal. That's established in the beginning.
Yeah, because of the security, right? When he's first introduced to we're introduced to him and the scientists, and they're about to tell him, like, we've chosen you for this mission. The guards don't want to uncuff him because they say that he is, he's known, he has all of this stuff on his record. And then they just politely kind of tell him, like, you don't want to hurt us, Cole, right? And he's just like, no. And then they uncuff him.
Well, that's not what he's there for.
Did you, in your research, did you hear about the lawsuit that happened to Universal over this?
Wasn't it the design of that weird TV, the Globe TV? In the future?
That might have been a part of it, but I think it was more so the chair that they kind of use to when they're interrogating him for information. I guess that's
how it's like up off the ground.
Yeah, I guess
it's suspended.
I guess this guy had created that, and he claimed that Universal stole his like kind of blueprints for that for the film without permission. So he slapped him with a lawsuit, and apparently the judge was on his side because he got a grip of money, and I guess they were going to have to take out all of the scenes that featured that chair, but then they were able to pay him off to keep the those scenes in the movie, because I think if they had cut all of that, it would have, to me, severely hurt the kind of aesthetic of the film. Right?
Yeah, I agree. And would they have had to reshoot those scenes, considering that their budget was a little tight?
Yeah.
On the film, I did read about that. The lawsuit.
Super bizarre, right?
But it's cool. It's a little cool detail in the film in the future.
Yeah.
The interrogation chair. We were talking a bit about Dr. Rayleigh before, and about her her character arc.
Would you say that she kind of by the end has fallen for Cole?
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's something that draws her in, whether it's that need to help, or, she starts to realize that he's telling the truth, or at least he believes he's telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Even though she's still uncertain, she leaves the voicemail and is really happy about that because it's just a carpet cleaning company. It's like no big deal. So she's like, oh yeah, we're just, we're crazy. It's just a carpet cleaning company, but it's not a carpet cleaning. It is in this present, but they intercepted that phone call. They have that message because when she starts to tell Cole what she said, he recites it right back to her, word for word. But then when they're hiding out and they're in the movie theater, which, by the way, that movie theater was a real busted Skid Row looking movie theater. It had like duct tape all over a lot of the seats. That's probably not the theater you want to be hanging out in for 24 hours at a time. But when they're there, they're hiding out, and she's going to run away with him to the Florida Keys, because of the commercial that he saw, and he was excited, and he'd never seen the ocean. And he asks, why are you doing this? Why are you helping me? And she just says, maybe something happens, maybe it doesn't. In a couple weeks, if there's still traffic jams and football games and everything, then we know that everything is okay. But she definitely has a much deeper relationship with him by the end. And obviously, in the airport, and during his death scene, she's very heartbroken about that. But it's a very interesting journey that she takes in just this short amount of time.
I wonder what her thought process was, because and they reference this because he kind of just they pull him out from when he gets put in isolation, right, in 1990.
Yeah, he pulls the Houdini, as Jeffrey says.
Yes, and then disappears for 6 years, and then pops back in and figures out where she is, and pretty much abducts her. But I just wonder, like, what's your thought process in that, where this guy like miraculously disappears for this length of time, and you have this like weird feeling, about him, and then he just comes back.
Yeah, I mean, like the most random way. Now when he intercepts her in 1996 after that lecture,
mm-hmm.
he says that he's been living on the streets. So I'm wondering how long he was in 1996 before he was able to find her.
Because they don't really. So he's transported back into World War I. He gets shot. He shows up naked there. So then obviously the troops and stuff know that he's out of place. And then it kind of like, it just switches scenes, and then that time jump where he is able to go back to 96 is not shown to us, correct?
No, yeah, you don't know. They haven't been able to pinpoint the time, but when he shows back up, when she's outside the 12 Monkeys headquarters and spray paints, he shows up there. It feels like they were able to pinpoint the time a lot better than they had before.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering, the first time in 96, when he abducts her after the lecture, how long he had been back in that time period before he was able to find her.
Yeah, because he kind of says like, I've been living on the streets. I probably smell really bad, and he looks like he's been kind of through it,
Yeah.
That's a good, that's something I never really thought about. Yeah, he could have been out there for quite a while.
But one of the things that makes Rayleigh a believer is the link to the World War I jump. is because she has the information in her lecture about, she starts off talking about the guy who shows up in the 14th century, talking about a plague, 600 years from now, which you were to assume is one of their time travelers from the future that they hadn't pinpointed the time. It's not an exact science, as the raspy voice guy says. They probably sent someone back. He ended up way earlier than he should have. But then she tells the story about Jose showing up in World War One with shrapnel, not speaking any French, and then just disappearing from the hospital. And she finds the picture that she had used for the book and for the lecture. She finds that original picture and looks at it, and you see Cole in that picture next to Jose. So then she starts thinking something bigger is happening here. It's not just the rantings of a crazy person. And then when she helps him, and after she pulls the bullet out of his leg, which is what happens, before when he abducts her, and she helps him out, she pulls the bullet out of his leg and realizes that that's World War One, and then that sets her down the path of looking into the picture, and then she finds the picture of Jose. So sorry, I had that switch there. But yeah, the bullet that she digs out of his leg that after he was shot, the cops tell her that it's from a rifle, from this time period, and she's wondering how he has a bullet from World War One in his leg, and then she looks up the photograph of Jose and sees Cole in that picture, and even starts to kind of question her sanity a bit. Have we reached the point to talk about the ending of the film?
I would say so.
Well, because of my lack of time, I didn't get a chance to do all the research I wanted to on this. At least by watching things, because I wanted to rewatch Vertigo very badly, and I just didn't have the time. Vertigo's referenced multiple times in the ending of this film, or in the third act of the film. Obviously, they're watching the film in the theater. And as I mentioned, we were talking about La Jetée, that there's Vertigo references in that film as well. But I really wanted to sit down and rewatch the movie because Vertigo's what I think is Hitchcock's masterpiece, like number one masterpiece. But I didn't get a chance to rewatch it. But there's the scene where they're in the theater and they're watching the movie, and Cole, as I mentioned before, says, "Oh, I think I've seen this before, like on TV when I was younger." And they're looking at the tree, the rings on the tree from the redwood that was cut down, and it's got markers for the dates as to what happened on this date, according to this ring. And it's here's where I was born, here's where I died. And then there's lots of references after that, with her changing into the blonde wig. She's wearing that same raincoat. There's the Vertigo score.
Bernard Herrmann?
Bernard Herrmann, yeah, you're right. Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't sure I understood you at first. Yeah, you hear the Bernard Herrmann score from Vertigo, and then they're having that conversation about, past lives or possible past lives, or this happened in the past. I'm not sure what the past is, but it's from that scene where they're looking at the dissected redwood tree in the forest in Vertigo. But I was really bummed I didn't get a chance to rewatch Vertigo. It's been maybe 2 years since I last watched it, but I was trying to rewatch it for purposes of this podcast. I just ran out of time. They're going to run away. They're going to the airport. They're going to go to the Florida Keys. And as they're traveling to the airport, the cabbie remarks that they might be late, and they think they have plenty of time, but she says no, because this morning you have to deal with the army of the 12 monkeys. And they look at each other and wonder, what she's talking about. And she says, yeah, they released all these animals from the zoo. And then they can see the animals running through, the city or across like the expressway. And then they get very happy because the 12 monkeys, who they thought released the virus, Rayleigh realizes, they weren't interested in releasing a virus. They just wanted to free the animals. That's what they were all about. So there's this elation that they both have that, okay, the virus isn't real. And they have hope for this brief period of time. They get to the airport. She's going to take care of the tickets. He starts realizing, I've been here before. I've been at this airport. He still knows that something is up because this is all very familiar to him. And as what we're going to see happen is he was there because he's the little kid that witnesses his own death. But she gets the tickets, and behind her in line is Dr. Peters with his briefcase that he's got the virus stashed in. And she doesn't recognize him at first, but then she recognizes him, she was in like the bookstore or at the duty-free shop or something.
Mm-hmm.
And she recognizes him, and then that's when she goes and finds Cole and says, hey, like, it's Dr. Peters, he's Dr. Goines' assistant. Or she recognizes him from the picture. Well, she recognizes him from the lecture, but then she sees the picture in the paper of him and Dr. Goines together, and then she realizes that this guy worked for Jeffrey's father. He's the one that's responsible for the virus. So she tells Cole, and that's when Cole tries to do what he can to stop it with the pistol that Jose had given him, which, by the way, is a very strange pistol. It's called a LeMat revolver.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you've ever watched Westworld on HBO, it's the revolver that Ed Harris's Man in Black carries. It's got like a 9-round cylinder, but if you look at the gun, it's got 2 barrels, one on top, one below. The one below is much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
It's got nine rounds in the regular cylinder, and it's got like a shotgun shell in the middle that fires out of that bigger barrel. It's a really weird pistol. But when I was watching it for the show a couple nights ago, I was like, oh shit, like I've seen that gun before. That's a LeMat pistol, which I looked up because in Westworld, when I saw that the first time, I was like, oh, Ed Harris carries like a very odd looking pistol. I've never seen that before. So there's your little piece of trivia for the night. Like random ass trivia is that I happen to know what kind of revolver that is. Simply because I looked it up after watching Westworld. But yeah, Jose comes back, wants it correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like the scientists in the future want Cole to kill Rayleigh because she's distracting him from the mission, because the mission is to obtain the virus, and he's not coming back because he's running away with her. But I think the nature of the phone call that he leaves in the airport about this is, the army of the 12 monkeys is a red herring. It's not them. I did my part. I'm not coming back because he's running away with Dr. Rayleigh.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking that maybe the virus is real, maybe it's not. Maybe he's been crazy all along. They thought that that 12 monkeys had released the virus, but they were wrong. He's not coming back. But when Jose shows up at the airport, he hands him the pistol and says, be a hero. And Cole says, oh, this is about me following orders.
So you think that... okay.
I believe that the intention wasn't to kill Dr. Peters, which is what Cole ends up trying to do, realizing that he is the one to release the virus. And he tries to change the past, even though it can't be done. I believe what Jose was wanting him to do, based on the orders of the scientists in the future, was to take out Dr. Rayleigh. Because that sounds what Jose's mission is, to keep Cole on track.
Mm-hmm.
But then he tells Cole, you can be a hero here and do this. So he hands him the pistol. But once Rayleigh says, hey, it's Dr. Peters, he's the one with the virus, he's the one that releases it, Cole tries to assassinate him in order to save the world, basically. But obviously that doesn't work out because the past can't be changed. He's killed by the cops that are after him.
He makes a big scene, and runs
Yeah.
through the metal detector.
Yeah.
And there's just too much distance between him and the...
Dr. Peters.
Yeah, Dr. Peter.
Yeah, who even turns around and he turns to young Cole and tells him to get out of the way. And in Cole's dream, early on, he imagines that's Jeffrey Goins doing it. And that's what, kind of gives him the idea that Jeffrey Goins is the leader of the army of the 12 monkeys. He's the one that releases the virus. But his memory or his dream or whatever it was that he was having is fake. It's not Jeffrey Goins. It's actually Dr. Peters carrying the briefcase, dressed the same way, telling him to get out of the way as he runs through.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just got that very haunting ending where his younger self witnesses the death of his older self as he tries to save the world and fails. That scene's incredible. That's I think one of the best scenes in the film for just how it plays out, but also how haunting it is that you're seeing that time loop come full circle.
And then after we see the scientists kind of meet up with Dr. Peters on the plane, we end on little James Cole looking up into the sky, right? He gets into his parents' car.
Yep. Sees the plane take off, and then that whole story begins. The virus is released, wipes out almost all of the Earth's population, and 40 years from now, Cole will be sent back to try to study it. So how old do you think that kid is?
Well, how old do you think Cole, adult Cole, is supposed to be portrayed in this?
Probably mid-40s, but at the same time, there's no way that kid is 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He's older than that. I'd peg him around maybe 8 to 10. He could be a bit younger, but I'd say probably 8 is a good ballpark. So that means Cole would be just shy of 50. And I don't know how old Bruce Willis was at the time when that movie was made. Probably not 50 years old.
He's early 70s right now. Don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure.
Born in 1955. So he was 40 years old when the movie was made. So he's close. He's probably about 8 to 10 years too young based on the timeline established in the film. But that's not a knock against it. I was just kind of curious. If that's 1996 and the future is supposed to be 2035, that's about a 40-year gap. A 39-year gap to be exact. And how old is that kid who grows up to be Cole of the future in 2035? You want to get into reviews?
Always, man.
The world that we know it essentially ends in 1996 in the context of the film because of the virus.
Mm-hmm.
So the art department does a great job making the futuristic world of 2035 using kind of pre-1996 technology. I mean, we said it's got that kind of steampunk aesthetic. And Janet Maslin, who wrote for the New York Times, said that since 12 Monkeys has the junk heap aesthetic that Mr. Gilliam favors, nothing in the film is sleek or foolproof, certainly not its time travel apparatus. Which we didn't really talk about. It's kind of it's almost like him in a plastic tube.
Mm-hmm.
Being sent into this void behind the wall that we never actually see. We just see him kind of shoved into this hole. And we see earlier in the hospital when he's trying to escape the mental hospital, we see him stumble into the MRI machine, or that room where the MRI machine is, and kind of have those weird flashbacks of time travel. Okay, so here's our buddy Roger Ebert's review. Compares it to Blade Runner, which was, as we established, also scripted by David Peebles, and Brazil, also directed by Terry Gilliam. He wrote, "The film is a celebration of madness and doom with a hero who tries to prevail against the chaos of his condition and is inadequate. This vision is a cold, dark, damp one, and even the romance between Willis and Stowe feels desperate rather than joyous. All of this is done very well, and the more you know about movies, especially the technical side, the more you're likely to admire it. And as entertainment, it appeals more to the mind than the senses. San Francisco Chronicle, I believe that's Mick LaSalle, said the film's startling depiction of the world of 2035, where human life has been driven underground by a 1990s viral outbreak that annihilated 99% of human life, may not always make sense, but 12 Monkeys rattles with insightful sound and fury, and its bleak visions are hard to shake. Which I agree with, considering, as we've talked about, I think the ending is very haunting.
Yeah.
I read you James Berardinelli's review earlier about that. Rather than them going to the past to try to change it, he's there to make a better future. Here's kind of a negative review, oddly, from Richard Corliss, who writes for Time. He felt that the time travel and post-apocalyptic futures were cliche, and wrote that in its frantic mix of chaos, carnage, and zoo animals, 12 Monkeys is Jumanji for adults. Which, what the fuck? The zoo animal thing is like such a small part of the end of that film.
I mean, and there's the bear and the lion towards the beginning of the film, but that doesn't equate to what he's saying at all.
They're not like rampaging through the city.
Yeah, well, that's what you gathered from the movie.
Watch that entire movie and you focused on these one or two scenes with animals that are so short and insignificant.
It sounds like he's just saying that because of how the movie opens, where it says like the wild animals once again rule the world.
He does have a good line. I'm cribbing from IMDb. That's like, in the Sixth Sense, he's Haley Joel Osment's character says that he sees dead people. And you're like, and then 12 Monkeys, Bruce Willis says this. It has nothing to do with it. It's actually a really good line in 12 Monkeys when he's talking to Dr. Rayleigh and he says, as he looks around in that past of 1996, all he sees are dead people. Which is a good line because all of those people are going to be killed by the virus shortly after this. So it opens, I think, number 1 at the box office. You said it got a limited release just before the new year. Opens on the first weekend of January 1996. Grosses $13.84 million, making it the number 1 film. Held the top spot for 2 weeks until From Dusk Till Dawn opened up on January 19th. The third best Robert Rodriguez movie.
What's your first two?
I kind of say Desperado, but the more I think about it, Planet Terror is my number 1.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Planet Terror is pretty fucking perfect. And then Desperado. That's a pretty tight number 1 and number 2. But those movies are so great, and then From Dusk Till Dawn's a good number 3. But every time I watch Planet Terror, I enjoy it more and more.
Fucking Tarantino, when what does he say? He's going to get my dick wet.
Joel always repeats the line where he's like, fuck the gas, fuck it. It's like, no, fuck the gas, fuck it. So, it has a good opening. It makes decent money. I think what'd you say, 57 million? Doubles its budget, at least in the United States. As you said, it got nominated for a Best Supporting Actor for Brad Pitt. Unfortunately, he loses to Kevin Spacey for The Usual Suspects. And I believe it got an Academy Award nomination. Yes, Best Costume Design for Julie Weiss, and she loses to a movie called Restoration, which I kind of remember, but not really. It's like a Meg Ryan movie. But as you said, Pitt does win a Golden Globe for his performance. Well earned. He's fantastic in the movie. It does win a Saturn Award for Best Science Fiction Film of that year. You want to know the movies it was up against?
Yeah, sure. Let's hear it.
4 of these are utter trash. One of these is an amazing movie that we've covered on this podcast. Gets nominated for Best Science Fiction Film with Congo, Judge Dredd, Species, Waterworld, and Strange Days. One of those movies is not like the others.
Strange Days. Everybody knows that you love that movie.
I love Strange Days. It's on HBO Max for anyone. It should be on Max right now. It's just not in the proper aspect ratio, which is unfortunate. I have no idea why they do that. But the Saturn Award seems like it nominates any sci-fi movie that year, regardless of quality. Because I would look at 12 Monkeys and Strange Days and think those are much, much better films than Waterworld, Congo, Judge Dredd, and Species even.
I love Species, but it's definitely not on the same tier whatsoever.
Three of these movies are utter trash. Species is enjoyable, but not great.
It's a great kind of midnight movie, you know?
Yeah, okay. Okay, I can see that. Congo is very bad. Judge Dredd is really bad. Waterworld is just the Mad Max ripoff. That's only real redeeming thing in it is Dennis Hopper is having the time of his life. So that's 12 Monkeys. By the way, I know that you and I have mentioned this. I do want to mention it to the listeners.
All right.
That Sci-Fi adapted the film for a series back in 2015. The series is surprisingly great. I highly recommend it. If you can find it somewhere, I don't know if it's streaming. It might be on Peacock since that's a Universal property.
Mm-hmm.
But I highly recommend the TV series. It kind of follows the same story, but because it's a series, it takes a lot of different directions. And it's great. Actually, it's on Hulu. Awesome. I might do a rewatch of it now that I know it's on Hulu.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and check that out too.
Yeah, watch it. It's very, very good. And the woman who plays the Jeffrey Goins part, the Brad Pitt part, she plays Jennifer Goins, is Emily Hampshire. She's excellent. If you've ever watched Schitt's Creek, she's Stevie, the clerk at the motel. She's very, very good in that role. So anyone who has a subscription to Hulu and is interested, watch that series. It's fucking great. I know that Sci-Fi is always very, like, the quality of their series is either very good or very awful. And 12 Monkeys is one that's very good. So check that out. It also has one of what I think is the best endings of a series ever. One of the great last episodes. That kind of wraps up everything I have to say about 12 Monkeys. It's getting a little bit late.
That's right.
So I will not keep going. This is a movie that's surprisingly I can talk about a lot because it's so fascinating and I love the structure of it. Okay, I will ask you this. I don't know the answer. I think it's pretty obvious what my answer is. What's your favorite Gilliam movie?
It would be Fear and Loathing and then this.
Okay. Mine are the same, only flipped. Like I said, obvious. There's a reason why we're talking about this movie.
Yeah.
For Sci-Fi. But, yes, maybe a hot take, maybe a divisive take. I love Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. It bombed when it came out. I think it's attained cult status by this point. But that was a movie that when it came out, it only played in the theater for a few weeks, and Joelle and I, who were both working the theater at the time, I think we sat through it maybe a half a dozen times in those few weeks. We were just so enamored with it. And this was like both of our introductions into Hunter S. Thompson and all that. It just looked so nuts. And we just continued to watch it, and we would do the thing where it was like, oh, we have a half hour to burn, we're on break, or we're at the theater because he's waiting for his girlfriend to get off of work or something. and we would just like pop in for like 40 minutes at a time, watch whatever, and then bail as soon as his girlfriend got off work. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, I agree. My number 1 and 2, definitely 12 Monkeys, and then right behind it is Fear and Loathing. So I wasn't expecting that, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I thought maybe like The Fisher King or Time Bandits. I didn't expect you to say Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, because like I said, that's a movie that I don't know how many people like that movie, because it's a very divisive film, because there's a lot of people that just think that the novel is unfilmable.
Yeah.
And that was the thing behind it for many years. But having read the novel many times and having watched the movie, I'm like, that's pretty fucking good. It's a pretty great adaptation.
That's a movie that I've, I think I had a dub of it, and I would just watch it constantly. It's like, it's on a par like with A Clockwork Orange or Fight Club for me, where it's just something that would just be in constant rotation throughout my childhood. And I don't even really know why. I think it's just, like you said, it's because it's so bizarre and kooky,
Yeah.
But a lot of fun.
It's great. Haters be damned. That's a great adaptation of that book.
But also, as you bring it up, The Fisher King would be my third for sure.
Would be okay. Probably mine too. But it's kind of hard for me to not throw out Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which is a great comedy, one of the all-time great comedies.
That's one that I have in my collection as well.
Good movie. Time Bandits is pretty great. Have to rewatch Brazil. Been forever since I've seen it. But I as much as I do remember enjoying it, it wasn't, for me, it wasn't on the level of like these other movies of his.
Mm-hmm.
At least, 12 Monkeys, obviously, because of the sci-fi. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas because of how bizarre it is. And then The Fisher King because it's like funny but dramatic and like really heartbreaking. And it's got these two wonderful lead performances. And Time Bandits, which is so much fun. So I'd have to go back and revisit Brazil. And it's been forever. I think I've only seen it once, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
That's another one that I think that he kind of got reamed on as far as the production and stuff.
I think he went like way over budget and over schedule on it.
Yeah.
So there we go. I almost forgot about that, because we kind of, sometimes when we talk about a director that we haven't really discussed before, I know that you and I like to kind of figure out what our rankings are, what our favorites are.
Did you want to do a little teaser for next month before we get out of here?
What do we have coming up next month? Next month is a big budget sci-fi blockbuster with a major star from a director that you and I have discussed on this podcast before a few years ago. I don't want to say much. It's one of the all-time great, like hard R summer blockbuster sci-fi movies. That's all I'm going to say about it. It's fucking wild. I can't wait to talk about it. That's another movie that when it's on, I'll just leave it on.
All right. Sounds promising and very obscure.
I hope that's a better tease than the one I did for 12 Monkeys last month, where I'm like, I don't know what to say about it, because I think anything I say is going to give away what it might be. But I think a hard R, great sci-fi blockbuster film from a director we've discussed before is still vague-ish.
Yeah, it could be a handful of things.
Can't wait to talk about it. And now that I'm thinking, it could be a number of films, and we might discuss the other film next summer. It's probably on my short list.
All right, man. Well, as per usual, this was a whole lot of fun. Thank you everybody out there for tuning in to our first Summer of Sci-Fi. for this year.
Well, first Summer of Sci-Fi movie for this year. In our second annual, as you said at the top of the show.
Excited to keep on trucking with this. Again, thank you, Chris, for being super flexible with your schedule. I know we've had on both sides, we've had a crazy week, crazy month. So thank you.
Oh yeah, for both of us, it's been pretty brutal. But of course, man, you're welcome. I'm glad we got a chance to do this. This is the literal last day of June, but we managed to squeeze it in.
Yep, as you said, I think last month we're no cheating. Everybody out there listening, if you are unaware of what we do, we are a podcast, a movie review podcast based out of San Diego, California, and we are available on all major podcast platforms as of now. So check us out, give us a 5-star review and a little write-up if you're feeling generous, and check out our Instagram and Twitter. The Instagram handle is at @dropthemic_podcast, and our Twitter handle is at @dropthemicpod. So super easy to remember. Check us out, give us some love. Drop in our DMs if you want to be a guest, or if you have a movie that you would like us to discuss. And until next time, this is Chris Pawlak, Wesley Swanson signing off, saying good fight and good night.
Good night.
Yo, Gomes! Yo, Jeffrey! Gomes! What? Hey, look here. This here's James. Now, do me a favor. Why don't you show him around, tell him the TV rules, show him the games and stuff, okay?
How much you gonna pay me? How much? I'd be doing your job.
$5,000, my man. That enough?
5,000?
I'll wire a check to your account as usual.
$5,000. $5,000.
$5,000.
I'll give him the deluxe mental hospital tour.
My man.
Kid around and make them feel good.
Yeah,
Work out. You're the prisoners. No, you're the guards.
Now you got it. Now you got it.
Right. Okay. It's all in good fun. All in good. Here's some games here, and there's. Get out! Get out! He was in my chair. Games. Here's some games. Games that want to get out. See? More games. Games, they vegetize you. See? Yeah. If you play the games, you're voluntarily taking a tranquilizer. I guess they give you some chemical restraints, huh? Drugs! What did they give you? Thorazine? Haldol? How much? Learn your drugs. Know your doses. It's elementary.
I need to make a telephone call.
Telephone call? That's communication with the outside world. Doctor's discretion. Hey, if all of these nuts could just make phone calls, it could spread. Insanity oozing through telephone cables, oozing to the ears of all these poor, sane people, infecting them. Wackos everywhere, plague of madness.
Come on, let's go.
In fact, very few of us here are actually mentally ill. I'm not saying you're not mentally ill. For all I know, you're crazy as a loon. But that's not why you're here. That's not why you're here. It's not why you're here. You're here because of the system.